Craig, Scott, welcome to Washington Times Higher Ground. It's always funny when we do these interviews. You and I have actually, full disclosure, known each other for a very long time, for like half of our lives. I've known you for a very long time, and you're one of my best friends. And so when we get to do these interviews, it's always interesting because I know you and I know your heart and I know where you're coming from. But we are here, 25th anniversary of the Columbine shooting. You are a survivor of that shooting. Your sister was killed during it. And this is a big anniversary, 25 years since this happened. As we are here now at this anniversary, what's going through your heart and your mind?
Yeah, first of all, as far as our friendship, we met back in 2004. You were putting together something on your college campus called Peace Project. It was an awesome thing that impacted the campus in an awesome way. You had me speak, you had a number of speakers there. One of my favorite memories, actually, of all the times that I've gotten to travel and speak and share my story is actually on that campus because afterwards, all of us college kids, and I was their age, went out to a dive bar, and we were all. It was really cool though. It was like not just we weren't going out to get wasted or anything like that. We were just having a good time, and at one point we were all together. We had put our arms up all around each other, and we were all singing Piano Man the entire bar. We had gotten the entire bar, every single person, and it was just this really cool connected moment. But in all of the time that I've been speaking, but yeah, this 25th anniversary of the Columbine shooting is coming up on this Saturday on the 20th, and I've been doing a lot of preparation for myself personally. It just came to me as being an important day in my life. Like 25 years later, what have I learned after all my travels? What have I learned um, with what's happening in our country with youth uh, and so I've been what have I learned, just what have I learned on my personal journey that I could be able to share that would be helpful all these years later. And I knew there would be some news interviews. I didn't know how many. And but I've always kind of used the news media to be able to get out a message that I thought was important. And thanks for having me on.
No, I mean, look, this is something that is incredibly important to talk about, right? Because what you went through, unfortunately, a lot of other people have gone through it. I mean, we've seen shooting after shooting after shooting, mass shooting events, violence, all sorts of things that have really continued since 1999 and in some ways maybe have gotten worse. When you look at everything that is happening right now in this country, morally speaking, we're in a really strange place. Could you have ever imagined back when you were sort of moving forward past what had happened after Columbine that we would be where we are today?
Well, Columbine was the first mass school shooting of its kind then, and yeah, we have had a number of shootings since then. My hope and part of my smaller goal, and I'll tell you why it's a smaller goal, um, was to help stop these school shootings from happening. Um, and really, how one of the reasons I think that it's happened is because Columbine set um, a bad precedent in our country. And it's almost like a formula in the mind of the collective American conscience. And that was if you're bullied at school or treated badly or poorly, then it's justice in some weird, crazy way to go up and shoot up your school. The problem with that is that wasn't even the true of Columbine. Colum, the psychologist, everyone knows that has really done any deep dive into Columbine, realizes that that is not the reason that that shooting happened. How they were treated was a smaller factor, and being bullied at school. And even educators today realize, that word bullying has lost a lot of its meaning because there's kids that you say, oh, you're a bully, and then you bring in the bully, and they say, "Oh, they're the bully," and it's like calling a person a jerk today. It's kind of lost meaning. So what I usually deal with kids is talking to them. How does someone treating you? What did they do? What did they say? But so all it does hurt me when I hear about these shootings. But it used to. Years, a long time ago, 10, 15 years ago, it used to like really depress me for a couple of days. It no longer does that. I no longer let it have that kind of impact on me. Instead, to me, I learn what I can and I use it as part of my resolve to wanting to make a positive impact and saying that we have to shine a light. You know, there's a lot of people in darkness, there's a lot of people in disconnection with a lot of hatred in their hearts. And every day we have a choice, and we can start positive chain reactions in our life or negative chain reactions, or do nothing. And so my goal is to continue to be a part of something that my sister wrote about, which was starting a chain reaction of kindness, compassion, um, and the things that I think are, trying to live in a way that are antidotes to the problems that we have. I mean, Gandhi had there's a great quote by Gandhi, but it's be the change that you want to see in the world. Um, so uh, yeah, when I hear about, even just this last week, there was a ruling on a shooting, and thinking about this 15-year-old that did the shooting. It was a couple years ago. I spoke in the community where it happened. Um, I go back to what what would it take to get somebody out of that place of hatred, anger, where they really have no. They've gotten to themselves to a place where they don't really know what they're doing. They don't know the seriousness. They know it's wrong, but they don't know truly what they're doing. They've allowed themselves to be deceived with their own crazy thinking.
Yeah. One of the things, just as you're talking about this and you're bringing some of these issues up, obviously the bullying came up with Columbine. One of the other things that we've got to talk about, because it continues to come up every time there's a shooting, within 3 minutes social media is lit up with guns, right? Gun control. We need gun control laws. And it's the immediate reaction. For some people, it's their only reaction. They don't get into the morals, the values, the other issues that are going on. You've had to hear this again and again, and you've been asked this question again and again. But as somebody who survived the most unthinkable event, and an event that really started this conversation, what do you think about this gun control conversation that always emerges?
I think there's a number of factors that are important that play into somebody's why, into why they do something, and number of influences in their life uh, that are positive, negative, that lead them towards this terrible place. But it is not the main issue. Gun control. The two issues that get brought up after school shootings is gun control and bullying, and that's been since Columbine. And those are not the two main issues. The the issues are a spiritual and a mental health issue happening with kids and happening with people. And so, how do you get somebody out of being out of a dark place? Laws don't change people's hearts. A lot of these cases where shootings have happened, a lot of cases, kids got their guns illegally anyway. That happened in the case with Columbine. But even if there is a law, or even if you have a law, I'm for legislation of something um, that makes sense, that would help make it harder to do something. Um, Put an obstacle in the way of somebody who has hate in their heart that wants to do something evil. Um, but it's not the main issue. The tool in which you use to destroy people's lives is not the bigger issue. The bigger issue is us culturally in the hearts of young people. So you say, well, how do you do that? We're such a big country, and so um, I believe that one of the solutions is that all of us do something to contribute to the culture of where we live. When I go in and I speak, whether it's I do sometimes companies, rarely corporations, educational conferences, but mostly schools. And so when I speak at schools, I will give them a challenge. The shooters at Columbine, they made a videotape a month before the shooting where they uh, talked about wanting to start a chain reaction of school shootings, and they've done that. There's been a number of people that have idolized them, that have wanted to break their record and have. And at the end of the video, one of them picked up a sawed-off shotgun, pointed it at the camera, and said, "We need an effing kickstart. We need to get a chain reaction going here," and ended the video. At the same time that they made that video, which was never released to the public, and I'm glad it wasn't, because what we place our attention on, we give power to. At the same time that they made that video, this Rachel, my sister, was writing a paper in her class a month before the shooting. She titled it "My Ethics, My Codes of Life," and in it she talked about if she were her best self, the kind of person that she would be. And she talked about looking for the good in life and looking for the good even in other people. And psychology says that we tend to act how we think people see us. So if I think you see me in a good way, I'm going to act more that way around you. But she went on to say, she talked about forgiveness, people who had wronged her, showing mercy, forgiveness to people who had wronged her. She talked about not being quick to judge or label others. And she said this, she said, "I have a theory, an idea that if one person will go out of their way to show compassion, it will start a chain reaction of the same. And people will never know how far a little kindness can go." She ends her paper by saying, "You just may start a chain reaction." Well, we do start chain reactions. And so it's just being intentional about what kind of chain reactions do we want to start. And so, this story, Billy, has, as you know, being my friend, it's prevented school shootings from happening. It's prevented thousands of suicides. My sister's story is the largest story told in person in our public schools today, and it has been for the last 20 years
I
because
have
we've
to
had.
just I got to jump in on this because it is remarkable that at the same time you talk about spiritual warfare and the things that go on that we don't see, good and evil, and you have a situation where the shooters are talking about starting a chain reaction for evil, and your sister at the same time without knowing is writing about a chain reaction for good, right? And that is what, as you're saying, has been in the schools. I mean, your family has been at schools all over the country. You have spoken, all of you, media, in front of people with that message. And as you're saying, it has impacted so many lives. And it's an incredible message. One thing about you that I want to hit on here that I think is important, you were in the library where most of the carnage happened. Again, Rachel Joy Scott, your sister, she died during this event. I'm not in the library outside the school. When you look back, because you immediately spoke out and shared your heart and have not stopped, but when you look back at the steps you had to take afterward to get yourself to the place you are now, how did this shooting impact your heart and your mind, and how did you move forward?
Well, yeah, I was in the room where most of the shooting happened. I was in the school library. There were 10 that were killed in under 10 minutes, over a dozen wounded, and I had two friends killed next to me. And I barely escaped, only to later learn about my sister Rachel. And so, immediately afterwards, I was in a lot of shock. What I've learned about people is we're a lot more resilient than when we realize. There's things that kick in, like the shock and numbness. That was my brain's way of kind of protecting me from the trauma and the gravity of the situation. But to be honest, my community got an outpouring of support from around the world. The whole world, not just our country, was tuned in because everyone was like, was shocking. Like, why is this happening in American schools, or what, or how could this be happening? And even Columbine has the shooting has inspired negative other shootings. What most people don't know is the good that's come out from it, and that's what I'm sharing about my sister's story. The story of a teenage girl who believed that she could make a difference, who had kind of two beliefs core to her through her journal. She had 7 journals at the time of her death. Some were with friends, some were her personal, some were between her and God. And I'm sure it's every teen girl's fantasy come true for their brother to go through their journals. But she had a real depth, and she had a feeling about her life that she wasn't going to live to be very old. And at the same time, she was going to impact a lot of people. And she dreamed big for her life. You can see it in her journals. She wrote incredible things. Actually, I'm wearing a shirt here with one of her quotes. It said, "Don't let your character change color with your environment. Find out who you are and let it state its true colors." I actually have a read a couple other things she wrote. "Don't put limits on what I can do. I have faith. Why can't you? Don't keep me from my dreams. I can reach them if I believe." She wrote, "Things untold, things unseen. One day, all these things will come to me. Life of meaning, life of hope, life of significance is mine to cope." You know, every person wants to know who they are and why they're here. You know, identity and purpose, the two biggest philosophical questions that a person can ask. Who am I? Why am I here? When I go into schools, I try to speak into that a little bit. And I do that by saying, you have, who are you? Well, first of all, you are incredibly valuable. And you're like, that sounds pandering. No. Right now, your brain is sending 70 trillion messages to your body. When I start talking about all the amazing things that our brain and body can do, and we learn these things as we grow up, but you have intrinsic built-in value since you were born. You have this incredible, fearfully. I'm a person of faith, so I say fearfully, wonderfully made. But even if you're not a person of faith, you have incredible value as a person, and you always, even if you make a lot of mistakes throughout your life, you always have the capacity to be a part of one of these chain reactions to do good in this world. And your value, though, with kids, I tell them your value is not your value intrinsic, built in, is not based on what other people say about you. It's not about what you look like. It's not even about what you do for the world. Now, your value to this world and others is based on what you do, but you always have a built-in value. And it's not egotistical. It's not I'm better than you. It is that value is also in every person that I meet. When you start to have that kind of philosophy, because that's what that's really what I'm addressing when we're stopping school shootings. It's we're dealing with ideologies and dealing with a philosophy. My philosophy is you don't go around uh, attacking the lesser issues. You go after the main issue, and the main issue is in the hearts of and minds of kids in this country and youth, and has been all this time. So how do we address that? We all have a part to play in the culture that we create here in America. So I know these are broad answers, but when we when we realize that all of us can do something, and we have that kind of culture, and we see each other with value, and we know that we have value, um, it makes a big difference. I mean, I literally have looked in the face of thousands and thousands of kids tell me the worst thing that they've ever been through, and in a place you'd think some of the toughest kids too. I've had gang members, I've had people really that have been through some serious stuff and come up to me after presentation, and I listen, I hear their story, and then I always try to find a moment where I can just speak some encouragement, speak some life, speak a compliment to them. And I watch. I had this one girl, okay? She came up to me in Chicago after presentation. She was wearing all black. She was into goth. And this is years ago. And I usually have kids that come up and tell me, like, wow, that was so powerful. And that's going to change this or that about my life. And I accept your sister's challenge or the chain reaction. But this girl came up and the first words out of her mouth were, "They should have killed more of you."
Hmm.
And I didn't react. I just looked at her and she walked off. And then I had a bunch of kids say a bunch of good stuff. And then I asked the principal, I said, "Hey, that girl," I didn't tell the principal what she said to me. I said, "Hey, that girl that was wearing all goth." I said, "Do you think you could get her out of class and I could talk to her for a little bit?" And he said, "Absolutely." So I sat with her in a biology classroom and I just said, "Tell me your story." And she talked about how since elementary school, she was just ostracized and she's always been bullied and she's always been put down. And as I'm hearing these words always, and how she's sharing there's nothing good in her life, I'm realizing that there are instances she's not just making it up, but part of her problem was that she doesn't see any of the good in her life. And
Yeah.
she's only focused on the bad things that happen to her and the bad things in other people, to the point that she would say to someone who just got done pouring out their heart and watched friends killed and has lost a sister. They should have killed more of you. What hateful words. She doesn't even realize the amount of hate that she's saying. She didn't realize what she's really saying.
Yeah.
By the end of our conversation, though, Billy, she ended up choosing Rachel. What I did is I explained, I shared with her more about who the shooters were, and I said these guys weren't pushed to the edge and treated so poorly. And I said, in fact, Eric was probably more mean to people than he was treated poorly. They had friends at school. They had no record of abuse in their home. They chose the path that got them to this place. They believed the lies, and they knew what they were doing was wrong, and they killed people like Kyle Velasquez, the first person in the library with me who had a disability, sweet, gentle guy who, I mean, they killed innocent people. So so that's what it took. It took somebody stepping out of their way to take some time for this person. But if she had done something, if she had gone off, and done something terrible, it wouldn't be the principal's fault. It wouldn't be my fault. It wouldn't be her parents' fault. It would have been her fault. It would have been her to blame.
Her choice.
All of us could have had a moment to try to influence her in a positive way. And in that sense, I feel that we have a responsibility, but not in a legalistic, criminally chargeable type of way. She would have made that choice. Thankfully, she had a change of heart.
Yeah, as human beings reaching out, I was talking recently with an actor who was sharing his story of losing his son, and Gary Sinise, and he was just saying if we all reached out to each other more, the difference that that would make. And that's what you're describing there is look, you could have been super offended, really upset because what she said to you was really hurtful, and you could have been like, wow, what a jerk that kid was, and you could have just gone on your way, but you took that moment to reach out when you didn't have to. And I think all of us need to find those moments, to your point, not so that we're responsible for the actions of somebody else, but so that we come in and meet somebody where they are to help them go to a better place and find themselves in a more fruitful, area in their lives. And as you're saying all of this, we're rounding out to the end of our conversation. I could talk to you, as you know, for hours, and we have had many long conversations. But you're a person of faith. You're a Christian. You went through, again, horrific event, lost your sister. A lot of people would walk away from an event like that and say there is no God. If there was a God, he would have stopped it. There's all sorts of things. You've heard all these arguments. What was it that, I guess, led you to cling to your faith in the way that you have and to watch it grow? I mean, I've only seen your faith over the last 2 decades grow.
There was, to me, so much, and so much. I don't know if I would call it evidence, but there were so many things that I saw that were affirmance to the reality of my faith. Things that my sister wrote. She had a prophetic sense about her life being short. She drew a picture of her eyes crying 13 tears. There were 13 victims that were killed that day, just a half hour before she lost her life. She traced her hands like this on the back of an old dresser and said, "These hands will impact millions of lives." She said things. So there were things like that. But just in my own personal life, when I have listened to my spirit, when I've listened to, which I believe is the deepest part of who we are, we have a spirit, we have a mind, and we have a body. And part of the solution, I think, is to recognize, and our educational system did this for nearly 200 years. Our country did this, that we are a three-part being. We are not just material. Even science, quantum physics shows that down to the smallest things, everything is made of energy and light. And so um, that's a spiritual realm. There's I so the more that I have lived and followed what I believe to be my spirit and in my faith, uh, the more that I've seen, I could give you anyone that walks a life of faith can attest to this. I guess one of the biggest things was for me just my sister's story. Uh, she was one that was questioned about her faith in the last moments of her life with a gun to her head. She was shot from a distance, and then the shooters came up. And there's some controversy on whether that happened, but my family, we know that it did because the mom and family of Richard Cristaldo who was with Rachel. The first thing when he woke up, he said, "Where's Rachel?" And he gave this account, and he said that they came over and they were mocking her. They knew my sister. They had a class with her, and they worked on a production, a play. Dylan spotlighted her a few weeks before in a play called Smoke in the Room. And my sister actually played a character that was an alternative character, but very kind and compassionate. And so they knew her. They knew she was a person of faith, and they were saying things like, "Where is your God now?" And she was crying. 17-year-old girl been shot 3 times. She's crying, and they came over to Richard and they said, "Do you believe in God?" And he was an atheist and said he said no. And so they came to her, and he remembered thinking how much courage she had because he picked her up by her hair and he said, "Do you still believe in God?" And she said, "I do." And he said, "Well, go be with him," and took her last shot. Well, a half hour before this, I was telling you about this drawing that she left behind. She drew a picture of her eyes crying 13 tears, watering a rose. The rose is the U.S. national flower. And she showed her teacher this drawing right before class ended. And she told her teacher that drawing wasn't finished. In a completed sketch, the rose, which is the U.S. national flower, is growing up out of a Columbine flower. And there's a lot more to the story, but I felt like the rose represented the youth of the nation, and it was going to grow spiritually from what happened at Columbine. But it was Rachel's tears, it was her story, even her death, that was going to allow that to happen. If my sister could come back and live to be 100 years old, or be 17 and have the positive impact and start the kind of chain reaction she has, my family knows that she wouldn't come back. So faith is, sometimes it's a choice, sometimes it's ultimately I feel like it's a gift that was given to me. I have my faith is a gift, but I grow in my faith by in prayer asking more of it. Here's one thing that I can say about faith. My faith is, it has definitely been the biggest thing that has helped me get through everything. Times alone, quiet times. If you don't share in that faith, what I would say is take time every day. And this is, I talk to kids about this, is so important, to quiet all your thinking. We have 40 to 60,000 thoughts every day. Doesn't seem like we have that many thoughts, but we do. We tend to think about the negative, and most of our thoughts are redundant. And so it's important. All philosophies, religions talk about the importance of quieting, that all that noise and listening deeper within, being quiet. That's prayer, meditation. I'm going to end, I like poetry. My dad gave me a poem that was very helpful for me, has been over the years, and it's called In the Quiet. My sister wrote a lot of poetry too, but in the quiet, I find peace where the outside noises cease, where my mind has settled down and my thoughts no longer race. In the chamber of my spirit, I have found a sacred place. There, the unseen things embrace me, the invisible that's real, and we there enjoy the treasure that activity would steal. Hear the whisper of the poets who have beckoned us to know of the inner sanctuary where we seldom ever go. In the quiet of our being, creativity is born. It rises to the surface to a world that's hurt and torn. Deep within me, love replaces all the anger and the fear. In the quiet is a knowing who I am and why I'm here. And the person that knows who they are and why they're here, that's a person that walks in a lot of power. And even at 17, even though she wasn't perfect, made mistakes, my sister had a sense of identity and purpose even then. And so these kids that do these shootings, Ethan Crumbly, other shooters, they're looking for purpose, and they give into a dark fantasy lie of how to execute that purpose. And if we can help encourage, create more role models, point to right positive influences, teach on mental health, becoming emotionally aware, learning how we can translate certain negative emotions into positive ones, like anger can actually translate into determination. Anxiety can translate into excitement. These are psychologically sound, culturally relevant to today. Learning to take responsibility of my own thinking, treating my mind like a garden. What do I want? You can have thousands of thoughts every day. Is that really who I want to be? Is that when I want to focus? Because thoughts over time to what become how we feel and see the world. Emotions are just basically thoughts that manifest themselves into physiologically into our body. I think of something sad, I feel sad. I think of an injustice, I feel angry. So the thoughts, taking control of that thought life. But even deeper than all the thoughts we have is our spirit. And it's
Mm.
learning to quiet all that and let things originate from there. So that's my biggest source of healing.
Well, and that is powerful. And you have spent years, again, you and your family traveling around, bringing that message, your sister's story, your story, what you've learned, and so many amazing values to kids and families around America. Craig Scott, appreciate your time today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.